Okay, so Bill Gates was kind of talking about.
Yeah, God forbid we had to use Skype.
If you weren't one of the originals that was like, oh, gotta get toilet paper. I don't know why, but I'm going to stock up on like 2 years worth of toilet paper. The media definitely made it worse.
Oh,
I
my
think.
goodness. Yes, sir. Go off. Stand up. Over these episodes, I think I find myself coming across as a very paranoid and distrusting person. And that's definitely true to a degree.
What is up, guys? I'm Shiva.
I'm Sean.
And welcome to the Just Think
series, where Shiva and I just ask each other questions, kind of bounce off of each other, and just see where it takes us. Hope you guys enjoy. Let's get into it.
Let's go. All right, so today's topic is one that is near and dear to our hearts. It's one that's changed a lot of lives and one that sucks ass. So,
facts.
Sean, what happened in 2020? Why did COVID become a thing? Why is this even a thing?
Because some bitch ass ate a bat, bro. Some guy ate a bat.
Was it Batman?
Well, you would hope so, because I feel like Batman would have the resources to make sure that shit didn't get out. But some dude in China decided to eat a bat, which, I mean, culturally is really normal over there. But at the same time, I feel like, well, actually, first off, is it normal over there?
Well, even taking a step back further, was it actually someone eating a bat, or was that a cover-up? See,
man, I lean both ways. I'm gonna be real with you, and I might get some flame for this, but dude, I mean, there's a lot. It's because they're like, oh, the market that the bat came from was like 2-3 miles from this massive like Wuhan research facility. And so I don't know if it was intentional or not, if it came from the lab or it came from like a bat or whatever. But dude, either way, that shit is awful. It's killed.
Well, you heard about the reporter, right? That just disappeared.
Yeah, and there was a doctor too, wasn't there?
What happened? Yeah, it was a doctor. It was a doctor. I think.
Yeah, and then they were just gone. Which, I mean, isn't necessarily odd for China. But like, yeah, dude, as opposed to like why it happened, I don't really know. But I mean, I do think there was a lot of fumbling around and a lot of politics that got in the way, because people, whether you agree with past presidents or future presidents or whatever of your lifetimes, everyone's going to hate on whatever the current president is doing for some reason. You can't win. You're going to anger some people, you're going to please others. And in this past one, it was, it's understandable that people were distraught and there was alarm and stuff like that. But it turned into so much excess that it started causing problems, right? And so, you combine a bunch of different things, and you combine how the government sucks and how they're, they just are really in it for personal gain and things like that. And then you get, 500,000 people dead in the U.S. alone, and you get, millions dead across the world. And it was just turned into this massive, awful thing. And I hope we've learned from it, honestly. But yeah, what do you think about all this?
What I found interesting was by the time the news reached the United States, right? And this was like rumors spreading around, December, and everyone's like, yeah, whatever. And like January, and people like, yeah, whatever. And then March hit out of nowhere, and everyone's like, all right, we're leaving. And then universities are like, all right, get out. And everyone was like, okay, go home. And this whole country it shook us. Apparently, the last time sports was ever canceled in history, like football, and even the Olympics, by the way, was World War II.
Oh, wow.
It has never been canceled other than that one event, and then finally this one.
Dude, I did not know that.
Yeah, so the Olympics were supposed to happen in 2020, and that got pushed, which is also kind of ironic because I think it was supposed to be in Japan, and when it was canceled last time, it was also supposed to be in Japan.
But then World War II, they were like, "No, we can't."
Yeah, and then this one with COVID and everything, they're like, "No, we don't want people here." So
that is actually really wild. I mean, it comes to show that cliche, like people who don't know their history are doomed to repeat it. I mean, not that this was any fault of our own, I suppose, but I don't know, man. History finds its way of repeating itself. So I think it's kind of crazy.
Well, I mean, speaking of which, you've heard of what Bill Gates has said, right?
No, what did Bill Gates say?
About the outbreaks?
No, okay, well, maybe, but explain it to me, because I feel like I don't.
All right, hey, yeah. Jonathan, can you pull that up? Okay, yeah, okay, all right, he got it for me. So, yeah, so anyways, Bill Gates has had, like, interviews and stuff, and he's like, oh, yeah, so around every 100 years, we see history repeating itself where we have a huge virus outbreak. And that might even be because of, ever since we've gotten settlements and people have become closer together and we have such a globalized world now, that I think that it's only going to get worse in the future. But we also will have technology better to combat things like this. Like we had Zoom in order to maintain life and everything, right? We had technology that helped us. People were able to work from home. Like if we didn't have the internet or technology, we wouldn't have been able to probably survive as well as we had in society. I think tech really helped us in terms of everyone go home.
Yeah, God forbid we had to use Skype.
Yeah, Skype or Google Hangouts. FaceTime's all right though, but like not optimal for classes. But yeah, Bill Gates was saying like every 100 years we see like an outbreak, and Jonathan pulled this up for me, and it says, right, so 1720 there was the Black Death. Around 1720, around 1820 it was cholera, around 1920 the Spanish flu, and then finally 2020 we had the coronavirus.
That's almost sus.
Isn't that weird?
Like it's almost what.
Like, how is there a cycle so perfectly like that?
I do not even have any idea where to start and how to explain that.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so
it's weird.
You're talking about technology and stuff, and as we every 100 years when these big breakouts come and we're able to handle them better, it kind of has me curious. So in hospitals, there's I guess an issue of, because hospitals have so much medicine and antibiotics and anti viral medication, stuff like that. The quote unquote bugs, or like the bacteria and things that infect people, they become more resistant to massive amounts of these things like antibiotics, right? And so one of the issues in the hospital setting is with like infection and things like that, because if you're infected by one of these types of bacteria that has become, by living in the hospital, has become so resistant to all these antibiotics and different drugs that they tend to use, it became really dangerous, because then all of the stuff that we go to, it's already resistant to. And that has to do with microevolution and things like that. And micro versus macro versus all these, evolution is debated by some and not by others. But microevolution in the sense of watching bacteria, we can just hone in on that. Watching bacteria evolve can't be disputed. It just can't, because you can see real time, just so many experiments, because bacteria, do so fast that you can see it within a day, you can see it within a week, a month.
Well, even COVID is just a SARS virus, right?
Form of something like that. I'm not super into it.
It's a different form of the SARS virus, which was a big outbreak 8-10 years ago. I don't know. Yeah, they mutate and they get stronger, and people are worried that the next coronavirus will be a little bit more mutated. And
my thing is, what if the next bug is along the lines of those hospital bacteria, right? Like it comes out so the problem with viruses is that we don't really have a way to, other than helping our bodies get rid of it naturally, we don't really have a way to combat viruses. Of course there's a lot to get into there, but so my thing is, what if it's a bacteria, and that bacteria is so resistant to every antibiotic and whatever that we have, that even though it's a bacteria, it gets, it just starts killing hundreds of thousands, millions of people. And there's so many ways we could what ifs this situation, but I don't know, because every 100 years, if the bugs just keep getting worse, does our technology keep up? Hopefully, right? But at some point, maybe there's not enough overlap there, and the bug just kind of ice ages us, it kind of just resets. Okay,
so first off, the human immune system is very adaptable, but it takes a lot of exposure to overcome these certain levels of immunity, right? Some people have way better immunity than others. I don't know if you've ever heard of like parents being like, "Oh yeah, I let my kid eat dirt," like, and it helps their immune system. Kind of weird, but like it does, right? So yeah, there is truth to it. It is super weird though, but I mean, like my biggest worry would be like your kid is like now 15 in high school, like still eating dirt,
yeah, still like wets his bed and shit.
Yeah, so I mean, like yeah, immunity building is key, but there is things like bats and rodents that are just known to be huge on containing viruses, bacterias, and other like health related problems and such. So it's just like, I don't know, I feel like this could have just been avoided if we assume, don't eat the most disease filled creatures on earth.
That is, you make a great point here.
Because like that one didn't come from like the beef industry or anything, because we've had mad cow disease and things like that, and the swine flu and things like that. But and see, those are more common, but those weren't like global pandemics. This one was from a bat, and the Black Death was from rats. More specifically, it was like fleas on the rats or something. But anyways, you know what I mean. So like, this could have been a little bit more avoidable, I think.
Absolutely.
Had it been contained, but that's where the conspiracy comes in on like, was it supposed to be contained or was it purposely let out?
And I mean, well, so again, like I was saying earlier, there's so much bureaucratic nonsense that goes into this, especially in the United States, where a two-party system isn't what the, quote unquote founding fathers intended at all. The two-party system is completely broken.
Didn't George Washington, wasn't he against it?
Yeah, literally all of the founding fathers saw the issues with parties and essentially wrote it in such a way that you could argue that the interpretation is, hey, there's not supposed to be parties, right? Because, I mean, and it's logical too. If you think about it even just right now, if you were to sit down and say, okay, do I want to vote on someone based on what the entire party's platform is? Or do I want to vote on someone who they specifically are passionate about said issues, right? And obviously you'd vote on somebody if the specific person is what's going to end up in control, not the party, talking about the office of the president, of course, then that's who you want to vote on, the specific people. And so it makes sense. But in our two-party system that we have, there's so much division and polarization and
for actual change to occur.
And so you have, okay, you're a Democrat, now I automatically think of you in some way. Oh, you're a Republican, now I automatically think of you in a different way. And it's so wild, even in not even the government, just the country in general. It's just that polarization is so real. And then when you try to make them cohesive at all, it doesn't really work. And then you try to make them cohesive in the midst of a global pandemic where people are already freaking out. There's just so many problems that are like baseline foundational that by the time you get to, the surface of trying to deal with a pandemic such as COVID, there's just so many issues. There were so many things that could have been done better. And it's just absolutely wild that the government didn't, because the government is still collecting their paychecks, man. They like, why would they care? And so, I don't know. I'm definitely biased on this issue, but
yeah, I mean, it was very poorly handled. I agree. It's very weird, man. It's definitely one of those things when we're old and we're like telling the young kids that are like 10 years old and we're like 50, 60, 70, and we're like, yeah, I was in my prime 20s of during the, the coronavirus pandemic, and they're like, grandpa, you're so old. Like,
that's just crazy.
Yeah. That's crazy. You're so old. I see that in my history books.
Dude, I think it's already in the history books, man. There's stuff in our lifetimes that's been in the history books. And that's just wild.
It's just one of those things. It doesn't need time to make it in the history book. It was just so monumental that it instantly was the one. Yeah.
Which is just, I don't know, it's kind of crazy to think about. But yeah, no, you're right.
How do you feel about COVID's impact on society in more depth in the United States? Everything from ratings, suicides, job opportunities.
Well, so that's another thing that made it so deadly, right? Because the numbers we're seeing from, and I say this from a point of view that I've definitely kept fairly well track of COVID death rates and how they're reported and things like that. And some people call them conspiracies or just plain issues where, and I don't think this is necessarily off to say, so to speak, but, hospitals were getting extra funding based on how many COVID patients they had and how many, COVID patients were dying. And so there was a theory, at least, I don't know if it's been proven not yet or what, that hospitals were over-reporting COVID cases because they wanted the extra funding, which, when you think about how our healthcare system works, doesn't sound too far off base. And so you have those numbers that are, again, possibly maybe being over-reported. And even if they're not, those numbers are still scary. And then when you don't even think about or consider the fact that, the suicide rates, the child abuse rates, the domestic violence rates, all of these different depression rates, anxiety rates, all these different things that can lead to more deaths have indeed led to more deaths. It's just skyrocketed in those categories. And, it's just absolutely wild when you think, okay, COVID's killed millions of people, but how many more has COVID killed due to all of these other things, such as, suicide or depression, anxiety, abuse, things like that. And, we're talking about grocery stores and how, as soon as this stuff was coming out, people went and got toilet paper. It made no sense. COVID doesn't cause you to shit yourself. There might be some intestinal issues, but there's no reason for you to stock up on 20,000 rolls of toilet paper and then try to price gouge some kid that actually needs it.
What's crazy about that is the momentum for that built up so fast, because if you weren't one of the originals that was like, oh, gotta get toilet paper, I don't know why, but I'm gonna stock up on like 2 years worth of toilet paper, stocks up on that, you see everyone else doing it and you're like, well, shit, I need toilet paper eventually. I don't want to just go to the store in 2 months and it be all gone.
Exactly.
So everyone starts raiding because you're like, well, I'm not gonna miss out when I need it.
Precisely. Yeah. And it's just, you get that herd pack, well, if you peer pressure, if you're doing it, well, I don't want to be left out, because what if you're right? It's better that I err on the side of caution and get 80 rolls of toilet paper than have none when I need it and have to use my hand.
Yeah, it's kind of do you remember our episode 2 about the zombie apocalypse? Yeah, of course. For those of you listening, if you haven't checked out that episode, it's actually pretty great.
Yeah, it's really good. Good feedback on it.
Shameless plug. Anyways, well, what I was trying to say is in that episode we talked about vaguely talked about raiding and stuff and fought herd mentality on that.
Yeah.
And that's just so true. There was just such a herd mentality to just buy everything. Walmarts were just being cleared of everything in their aisles. I'm sure people buying shit that they didn't even need at all.
Oh, for sure.
At all.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It just makes you wonder, man, when an apocalypse does happen, people freak out, and the media definitely made it worse.
Oh, my goodness. Yes, sir. Go off. Stand up.
Yeah, dude. No, the media needs to chill out. I think we're reaching a new wave here where people are caring, at least our generation and further, are caring less about the news medias and finding out on their own information from other apps.
Yeah, or other sources at least. Yeah,
other sources. I think people are watching less CNN, Fox News, and things like that, and TV anchor stuff, and TV related channels, and more so documentaries and things like that on Netflix and stuff. So I think we're starting to get more of the truth. The Social Dilemma is a great example. That really exposed how the social media presence in our society is kind of impacting us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I think we're finally starting to get real knowledge out there.
I think because one of my things, you're mentioning, media and stuff like that, and I'm a very, I over these episodes, I think I find myself coming across as a very paranoid and distrusting person, and that's definitely true to a degree. Both sides have been caught in so many lies at this point, and it always brings me back, with certain government aspects, there's lobbying. Well, lobbying is literally just bribery. It's literally just big corporations bribing Congress to get votes that go their way, or whatever. And then you have insider trading, right? So bribery is illegal for everybody else, but when you call it lobbying and put it in the government, now it's fine. Well,
Yeah.
then you have insider trading. There's people that go to jail for decades for insider trading, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then they just relabel it as nothing in Congress, and they know that bills are going to come across their desk, and so they invest in, Tesla, or they invest in pharmaceutical companies because they know these bills are going to come across, and they know that, like, for example, with the COVID pandemic, all those stimulus packages included funding and a lot of, research funding for these massive corporations. Well, it's is it actually a shocker that when you go in, because there's public records to see, investing and things like that.
You can watch their portfolios.
Exactly.
You can see anybody's portfolio.
And you look at all of these government officials who a couple weeks, maybe a month before, invested millions of dollars in these companies, and then they just signed their own package. And so a lot of my distrust for this, the administration and bureaucracy just across the board comes from things like this. And then when you have the media, which has become so controlling on whatever stories do and don't get published, to the populace, it furthers that distrust in, organizations and institutions such as that. And so I'm actually really much glad that this pandemic has probably brought to light a lot of those things, and that people are at least more so tending to be question some things. That can also, again, that can cause some problems when something is just objectively a fact and people still question it.
Something great I've noticed the pandemic has opened eyes to is our education system.
And how effed it is?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You go through 22 years of schooling through college, and you still don't get taught how to do your damn taxes.
Facts,
man.
bro. Thank God for TurboTax. Sponsor us.
Yeah, seriously, man. You don't know how to do your taxes. You don't know how to rent your first car, your first apartment, how to get a lease, how to get mortgages, how to get a loan. None of that.
Yep.
None of that. You graduate college and you're like, I hope you learned, I hope you remember that time I taught you, calculus differentiation.
Yeah,
and,
y equals mx plus b is a line.
Yeah, so remember to use that when you're doing your taxes. No. So, and it's crazy because I even hear professors starting to say this. I have one professor, and she was like, yeah, I just don't want to give grades. She's like, I could just, have classes and be like, I don't do grades. You all get A's. But that doesn't change the fact that the students still in my class have to worry about other grades, and they're brainwashed into this think about grades mentality.
Oh, absolutely. I know it affected me.
She's like, I just want to be a professor where it's just learning. We don't stress grades. We don't stress GPA.
I love that, dude.
Yeah. And she was like, okay, well, I feel like when I grade essays or when I edit essays and I don't have to look at the grade, I do a lot better job on actually editing the essay because I don't have to worry about the point system.
Yeah.
And the students take it better because they don't have to be like, oh, I got, they don't have to get discouraged like, oh, I got a D on this paper. I'm not going to look at it.
Yeah.
Or the other way around, you're like, I got an A on this paper. I'm not going to look at the comments,
Yeah.
So when people only care about grades and things like that. So what I'm trying to say is I've noticed COVID opening people's eyes to, life didn't prepare me for this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Giving you more time to reflect and being like, well, do I really want to do this with my life? Do I really want to do that? Why hasn't school ever taught us this? I'm not prepared to jump into life, and life got real for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And school never taught us that either, how to be resilient.
No, absolutely. And I'm thinking as I'm, doing all those things you were saying, reading over a lease for my apartment as I, move into med school this fall, and how I was talking to my sister. My sister's a year younger than me. But she's getting her master's, I think, this month or something. And she's had a job out in California, and she's just doing some crazy, awesome things. And I was literally talking to her, and I was like, no, utilities aren't included. And she's like, oh, well, you got to make sure you set those up. And I was like, what are you talking about? I was just like, they're not included, but do I not just get billed? And she's like, no, usually if it's not included, you have to just see who does the utilities for the building that you're in, set up accounts with them, And then once you get all that set up, then they start billing you because they know that you live there. And I was like, of course, that makes sense. Duh. But I had no idea, dude. I was just like...
You'd walk in your first day, you have no electricity, no water.
Exactly. And so it's just little things like that where I'm just like, okay, you know, and even like what? Security deposits. You know, it makes sense when people require security deposits, right? I mean, I don't know of an apartment or house or whatever that doesn't. But when you think about it, you're like, oh, dude, it's, you know, $600 rent a month. That's crazy awesome. Yeah, but you also have to realize that you can't just have $600 and move into a place. You have security deposits that you have to pay that don't go towards your rent, usually.
And utility bills that don't get included.
You have to furnish it. You have to do all of these things where it's like, you know, ideally you grew up with, you know, your parents and you had, you know, well enough child life that these aren't really concerns that you've had at an early age. And then you get through high school and you get through college, and yeah, you might have a degree in, you know, like mine in biology or you know, minors in religion and whatever. But you get under the real world and you're constantly immediately making mistakes, right? Thank God for our parents who, you know, with good relationships, you call them up and say, hey, can you read over this lease? I did that. I was like, Dad, I read it over. It looks fine to me. But I saw this one issue at the top. Do you see anything else? And he actually pointed something else out. And I was like, I didn't even think of that. But, you know, of course, he's probably signed so many of these and mortgages and whatnot that it's just like, I think you're absolutely right. Like the COVID pandemic has just at least brought to the forefront. I think a lot of us knew, but at least brought to the forefront like, hey, you know, you pandemic in here and you kind of shift the natural like order that everybody was used to. You know, people get unemployed and all this crazy stuff. We realize we don't actually know all that much about what we thought we did, right? GameStop, the stock thing, you know, go to the moon was a prime example.
Just a meme.
Dude, a meme that literally soared that company's stock. The owner dude or CEO or whoever it was made just
multiple billions.
It was absolutely crazy. Yeah. And you know what that did? That had people going, okay, the stock market, right? And boom, people are now learning about it. Like I myself have invested in crypto. Like it's just, you know, all of these things that I never even crossed my mind before.
Well, they were about to claim bankruptcy.
Well,
and that's where like everyone was like, yo, let's shoot it to the moon, you know, because everyone's like, oh, I liked GameStop. Like that's nostalgic to me. I don't want him to go bankrupt. And everyone's like, oh, fuck it, I'll buy it. And then like everyone's buying it and it's like, oh, like it went up to like $300 or $500 a share from like $7 or something.
And you know what else my distrust comes from? Right? So the hedge funds and these massive investing like corporations or whatever you want to call them.
They knew it was going bankrupt.
And that's why they were what's it called? Oh, like shorting a stock.
Yeah, it was they're shorting it and they got really pissed that like they were trying to hold their ground.
And that's another thing. You have these massive elite institution corporations that are literally making money off of other companies and other people's demise, right? By shorting stocks, knowing that these things are going to go lower and all this different things. And if you guys don't know what shorting a stock is, definitely look it up. It's actually quite interesting. But essentially what happens is you borrow a stock and you sell it to somebody else knowing that it drops. And so when they're forced to sell it back to you, you've essentially made money. That's baseline, layman's term, kind of how it works. And these big corporations are doing that to, you know, for example, GameStop. Well, there's another where some of my distrust comes from is that they're allowed to do that all day, every day, no matter what, and make millions, right? There's these billion-dollar hedge funds that are doing this. But the second the common person decides to switch it up and just do something that they want to do in quote unquote free America, they shut it down. You saw Robinhood was stopped trading. They literally just shut it down.
They stopped people from buying the stock.
Yeah. So it's fine.
Kind of messed up.
It's fine when the elite do it, but we can't. And that just kind of, I think that put a lot of things into perspective, man. Yeah, it started off as a meme, but I think it did some good.
Yeah, like I said, man, this whole thing, how it's affected society is just very interesting. I think we're going to see a lot of articles and research in the next few years that kind of eye-open how society really is.
No,
you know?
Absolutely. And it's like, it has me thinking, like, all of the effects that COVID has done, like, to me and, like, my family and things like that. And I kind of wanted to, like, talk about just a little bit how, what were you going to say?
Oh, real quick. I had a couple more quick examples that are, like, kind of crazy. Yeah. Like we said, it's affected society, and society will, honestly, it'll never be the same after this. Like, some things will be very different and forever different. It's still up for toss how handshakes and things are going to be. I think those will be normal. I think those will be fine and whatnot. I was calling this like months and months ago that these menus at restaurants are forever gonna probably change
Saves them
to
money, man.
electronic. It saves them money. They can edit it quicker. They don't have to, throw away paper and then print out new paper every time they edit the menus. You can do a lot more with electronic menus. You can, add pictures, make it more like, aesthetic. And it's just easier. Everyone has a phone. You don't have to like give people menus. As soon as you sit them at a table, boom, they can scan it. Right. So I think there's going to be shifts there. If you think about like sanitation, like if you think about the subways and stuff, you know how like we saw videos of like cities cleaning out subways. Like I'm pretty sure some cities have just never cleaned their subway.
I would agree. I went to New York literally right before this happened. I was in New York when like everybody was like, "Oh shit, it's here," and I mean, it wasn't as dirty as I thought it was, but it was questionable.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think we're going to have new sanitation measures and stuff, too.
Just, like, baseline sanitation measures.
Yeah.
I think you're right. No, I definitely agree with that.
But, yeah, on to what you were saying about how, at a personal level.
I was just thinking, like, at a personal level, so for me, COVID changed a lot, right? Like, it really hit my family hard. There's a lot of complications there. We already weren't, doing too well. And I would just thought, like, during the middle of when I was finalizing my medical school interviews and applications and things like that, I actually got COVID. And I was, so my mom had got COVID. My dad has had COVID like a few times actually. And my mom didn't have any symptoms like at all. She like, the only way she knew is because she was donating plasma, I believe. And you get extra money if you have COVID antibodies, right? Because, things like that. And so she was like, oh, okay. And then my dad, he figured out he had it, and it was just like, okay. And when my dad had it, like the last like 1 or 2 times or whatever it was, because he, has some things, and so it's a little easier for him to get it. He had, he had all these symptoms and things like that, and so I was like, oh, please, no symptoms, whatever. And of course, I was isolating for the, CDC recommended time, doing everything on my own that, so I don't spread it. But dude, it kicked my butt. Recording this, I don't even know how many months later, I still can't smell or taste. I can't smell anything. And let me tell you, man, I take the meanest shits. I mean, and to sit there and not smell it at all is almost disheartening. Because, not that it was a bite for me, but I mean, when I'm sitting there and I'm just like, I don't know if I'm ill or not because, like, is it different? Like, your poop is very important. And so, that's just how I was, one of the things I still hate is that I'm like, oh, I love this place. And especially as I'm moving away from like, where I've been the past, I don't even know how many years. And I'm just, oh, I want to eat at this place one last time or this place. I can't because I can't taste any of that stuff. Yeah, it really does, dude. And like when people say like the symptoms, because I mean, again, it kicked my butt. So my symptoms were, massive headaches, congestion, throat hurt, cough, body aches. I mean, literally everything that you would think from the flu,
man.
You just turn that shit up to 10. And like, I mean, it was awful. And of course there's concerns of like what COVID does with clotting because like, you lay in bed for like so long and things like that, especially in our age group. And so I was trying to get up and move around. But I mean, even things like brain fog, like you just can't focus. You can't focus at all. And then there's COVID insomnia where it's just like for some reason doesn't let you sleep. I shit you not, dude. For literally. And so for me, dude, I'm not even exaggerating. For about 5 days, it felt like I hadn't slept because I would go to sleep and then wake up just more tired. Like it literally felt like I just had passed like 6 hours. Like I hadn't actually slept, And then towards the end, my skin would literally, it was hurting. Like imagine like a flu body ache for your skin, but it's also super sensitive. So I actually had a cloth that I had to put on my desk because if the desk was too cold, it would physically hurt my skin. Dude, it was absolutely wild. And it really, again, it kicked my butt, man. But like, it's things like that where you're like, I've been sick before. I've been injured. I've been like really sick before. But never have I been like so confused by a disease. Just the symptoms and how I felt and all these different things are just so unique across the board against like a lot of populations and individuals that, my ass was sitting there and I was just confused, brain fogged, dazed up and just like for, 10, 14 days or whatever it was. And I was just like, like, dude, it was wild for me, man.
Yeah, honestly, it's kind of weird because if you think about it, everyone's like, "Oh yeah," and when it first started, everyone's like, "Oh yeah, it only
Yeah,
affects old
yeah.
people," and they're like, "Yo, let's go have our spring break. It only affects old people," and then everyone's having fun, Mardi Gras, all this, that, spring break, and then, and then you hear things like this where your story is like just
Awful, dude. Awful.
atrocious, and so like maybe it's the fact that like people our age don't fear death
And our
because we're
generation.
young. But yeah, that's fair. I mean, but I don't even think it's the idea of fearing death. It's just they're also just like I
Yeah.
don't care. I won't get that sick. But when you do finally get sick,
Yeah.
and it sucks. And probably the worst one of all is the reminder that you still can't.
Dude, I'm
taste or
not even
smell.
kidding you, man. Yeah,
After, like,
I can
months.
get what I can get is it's something salty. I know that it's salty. If something sweet, I know that it's sweet, but I can't actually taste it, man. And it's ugh, I hate it. I literally have a bottle of hot sauce next to my monitor because I just put it on things.
I saw that.
Man. Like,
yeah. Well, I mean, we have this one friend who has a similar situation, and he's like, everything he smells is sulfur, right?
Our buddy, his smell hadn't come back for a while, and then when it did, some things just smell like sulfur to him. Yeah, and it's not all the time. Like if you're cooking meat, okay, well you're cooking meat, it smells like meat, and then the next time he's cooking meat, it smells like sulfur. That's just wild.
Do you have any theory? Can you explain that in like a biological
I have no
sense?
idea.
Like what is happening? Is it in the brain?
It's called. I believe it's called pronosmia or something like that. I could be wrong. It definitely starts with a P, and it kind of have like it's kind of anosmia is like where you can't smell anything, and so it's a P. There's definitely a term for it, and it's definitely like a known thing, but I have no idea. I haven't looked into it at all. I have no idea like how it is like biologically, and I don't even know if it's the same as like if it happened outside of COVID. Is COVID using the same mechanism to do that? I don't know, but it's just
yeah,
something wild that happens, and that's another weird thing with COVID that like you don't get the flu and this happens, but you get COVID and then experiencing crazy awful flu symptoms worse than any flu of your life. And then now you can't smell, and if you do smell, it smells like rotten eggs, dude. Like I'd be pissed. It really does, man.
Yeah, I agree. That sucks, man. Anyways, guys, thanks for checking out this episode. We hope you enjoyed. Stay tuned for next week.
Thanks for tuning in, guys. We always appreciate it. It's always just things.
Just things. Also, leave us a review and rating on Apple. Would much appreciate it.
Appreciate it, guys.
Yep. Peace.
Peace.